Painting Auto Parts Facebook page. It's Tuesday morning. We are getting ready to reassemble the Pontiac 400 engine that we've been highlighting the past 2 weeks. So just kind of bring you up to speed of where we're at and what's been done so far. So we've gotten the block completely machined. We were able to hone it and stay with the 40 over pistons that came out of it. They're in good shape. We just put a fresh hone on it so we could get a good ring seal. All right, second thing we've done, we've got a new set of fresh cam bearings installed in it. And then we've got the brass freeze plugs installed in it. We like to use brass, especially on older model vehicles where they don't get driven every day. That kind of these brass plugs kind of resist corrosion, which we like to use those so that they don't rust out over next 20 years or however long this customer keeps his car. So the procedure that we're doing this morning is we've got all our main bearings installed. We're going to torque these caps down to the specified 95 foot-pounds on the first four, 120 on the back one. And what we're going to do, we're going to measure this. We're going to measure the clearance here between the bearing halves, okay? And get a number that we're looking for. See what that clearance is with the bearings installed. And then we're going to take the crankshaft and we're going to measure the journals on the crankshaft. And then we're going to calculate our bearing clearance when we build this engine so that we have the correct bearing clearance, which relates to oil pressure. We want good oil pressure. We don't want it too tight, but we don't want it too loose. So we have a number that we shoot for, and we're going to check this on the mains first. And then if you'll pan right over here, Dave, we got the rods laid out right here. We're going to insert the rod bearing in it, and then we're going to torque the cap down, and then we're going to measure the clearance between the rod bearings. Okay, and that again is a number we'll be looking for. We'll measure the rod journal on the crankshaft and see what our bearing clearance is. So at that point, if our bearing clearance is good where we want it to be, we're going to go ahead and start assembling this thing. We've got the pistons laid out over here. They're all clean, been checked and cleaned. If you remember in the earlier video, we couldn't even move these pistons, okay? But of course you can see now we've actually taken the piston off the rod. We've had to go in here and hone this pin journal out a little bit so that you can see really now how free it is. And we did that to all 8 of them are like that. So they're good and free. Got all the metal debris out of them. Got all 8 of them laid right here. 7 here, 1's in the rod vise. We're getting ready to take this cap off, and then we're going to put the bearing in it. And like I mentioned, we're going to measure the clearance in it. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll highlight this build as we go along. We're kind of in the very preliminary stages. We're getting everything checked, cleaned, make sure all of our clearances are good, getting ready to move forward on this build. So we'll just stay tuned, and we'll keep you in the loop as we go on through this thing, start putting the pistons and cranking rods and so forth in it. But just wanted to bring you up to speed of the type of checks that we do before we assemble the engine. We got to have the correct bearing clearance, and that's what we're checking right now. So appreciate you tuning in, and we'll get with you at the next stage. Thank you. Okay, so we've got our bearings installed. We're using Moloch Cleveite bearings. It's a good triple bearing. It's what we call a tri-metal. It's the P series bearing. Has good wear factor, and it's a good all-around bearing, especially for older cars. So we've got all these installed. And what we're going to do now is we're going to torque these down. We're going to get the correct torque on these caps, and then we'll measure the clearance that we're looking for.
I got a quick question. Well, I noticed this number 2. I guess no, it's number 4.
4.
It's a little wider than the rest of them. Is there?
Yeah, that's the thrust bearing.
Okay, I got you.
So actually what the thrust bearing does, we've got a question about why is this bearing wider. Well, the thrust bearing on a Pontiac is a number 4 journal on the mains. And what that does, that sets the crankshaft in play. Okay, you don't want the crankshaft running back and forth in the block. So this is the thrust bearing that we use to control that. You're generally looking for 3 to 6 to 8 thousandths worth of in play in your crankshaft. Because you know, it can't lock up in there. It's got to be able to spin free, but you can't have it walking back and forth either. So that's a real critical bearing right there, and we always check the thrust. Once we get it installed, we'll check the thrust and see what kind of clearance we have. So on a Pontiac motor, the first 4 mains are one size of bolt with a torque factor of 95 foot-pounds, but on the rear main, it's a larger main bolt with a torque factor of 120 pounds. So these are 2 different sizes. The head size on these is 3/4. Head size on the rear ones is 13/16. So a little bit bigger bolt in the rear because it requires more torque. So we got them all in, we've got them all snugged. We'll get the torque wrench out and we'll do a final torque on all of them, and then it'll be set to check our bearing clearances, which is the next step. So we're going to pull them all to 60 foot-pounds to start with. Even this back one we'll pull to 60, and then we'll go back. All pulled to 60. The first 4 are going to go, like I said, to 95, so we're going to go ahead and go from 60 to 95 on those. Got all 4 of them pulled 95. Back one we got to pull to 120. Alright, so these are all torqued. 120, 95 on the rest of them. So mains are torqued in place. That's the same torque that would be as if the crankshaft were installed. Like as Amy mentioned earlier, we're going to measure the clearances here, measure the crankshaft journal, and then see what our difference is. The difference is what we're looking for as far as oil clearance goes. All right, with that done, we're going to move over here to the rod. So this is our rod. Of course, the bearing will lay in there. That's the rod side, and this is the cap side. So we're going to get us a rod bearing here. These particular ones are 20 overs. We had to grind this shaft. It went from 10-10 to a 20-20. We got the rod, the bearing lock goes in there. On this side, again verifying that they are 20, which they are. Sometimes you might get a little box mix up when they package these things, not too often, but you always got to check. Okay, rod lock bearing lock, bearing lock. They go lock to lock, lock to lock. Use a little oil on it. When we assemble, we use a little oil on the threads. Never hurts anything. So. Okay. We'll put the rod back in there. We're going to bring the torque down on these. These torque to 45 foot-pounds. We're going to back our torque wrench down to 45. This is a snap-on torque wrench. It's been a good wrench. I've been using it a long time. Alright, there's 40, so we're going to go all the way around to 5, which will make us 45. That's 45. So, you can see this bearing is installed. It's torqued 45 foot-pounds. We're going to measure this distance right here between these two bearing halves. Calculate what that distance is. We're going to measure the journal on the crankshaft, see what the OD on the rod journal on the crankshaft is. Simple mathematics, we deduct the journal size of the crankshaft from this size here, and that tells us what our bearing clearance is. A lot of people use plastic gauge. Plastic gauge it's okay. We tend to want to get a little bit closer than the plastic gauge, because the plastic gauge is kind of you're looking at the width that the piece of gauge pushes out, then you're trying to lay it on and compare it to the width on a chart. Not quite as accurate for us. We would rather do it this way. So that's the way we do it. So we got that done. I'm gonna go ahead and do another one. Check the torque wrench, we're still at 45. Make a nice couple easy pulls. Click it off at 45. So we got two ready to check. So that's what we're doing. So just stay tuned, and it won't be too much longer. We'll be doing some assembly. Thank you.